see all you guys here again. Yeah, this is like my third time speaking, so I'm a little bit nervous, just to let you know. So if I do mess up, please laugh, because it'll make it less awkward. Alright, so we've been going through Mark and looking at Christ's character and learning what it means to pretty much be a disciple of Christ. But this week we're taking a short break. We're looking into Luke. However, I feel that this passage ties into our previous studies, in that this is an essential ingredient into being Christ's disciple. During this teaching, actually, before verse 5, if you look, Jesus is teaching his disciples how to pray. Pretty much the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name, and so on and so forth. And immediately after that, he goes into this kind of interesting story about a man who is bugging his friend for some bread, and some, I guess, rhetorical questions about if you're giving gifts to your children. But he's trying to teach his disciples through all this the importance of a prayer life and how God enjoys listening to us pray to him. So if we look into the first story, where you have a friend, you're asking him for bread. If we look into the cultural context of this time, Jesus is painting a picture of a man in need asking his friend for help. First of all, in this culture, when you have visitors, it is disrespectful if you don't place any food on the table, to not be hospitable. If we look in Luke 6:38, we see how important it is to be hospitable. It says, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." And if we look as an example of this, in Genesis 18, Abraham is hosting God at his tent. And immediately, as soon as God approaches, Abraham runs into the tent and tells his wife Sarah to prepare some bread, and he goes and prepares a calf for, I guess, a meal for his guest, who is God. And because of Abraham's hospitality, the Lord tells him that his wife Sarah, who is, I believe to be in this passage, well past the age of childbearing, he says to him that she will bear a child within the next year. Abraham received because he was willing to give. So I guess back to the story, this man obviously does not want to be disrespectful to his visitor, and is therefore asking for 3 loaves of bread from his friend. Another thing that is important in this culture is that it is inappropriate to knock on someone's door when it's closed, especially at this hour. Throughout the day, normally the family would have the door open and people would just come and go, and they would have, I guess, many visitors throughout the day. But when the door is closed, it's pretty much a do not disturb sign. So it is very inappropriate to knock on the door in this culture. And the reason why behind this is because the house is just one room. So obviously at this night, the family would be sleeping. And usually it was on a mat, I guess, laid out on the floor. They would all be sleeping on that one mat, huddled together for warmth. And this culture, they had, I guess, animals like chickens and goats and stuff like that at this time. So the animals would actually be in the house with the family while they're sleeping. So you can kind of imagine if someone comes knocking at your door in one house, a one-room house with a bunch of animals, and someone's knocking at the door, making a really loud noise. It's causing a disturbance, and everyone's waking up. Your neighbors are waking up, and it's quite inappropriate, I think. But yet, even though this friend doesn't want to get up to give his friend bread, to lend him 3 loaves of bread, he gets up anyways. But it's not because he's a great friend, and he wants to provide and be there for, and get his friends back. But he does it so his friend will be quiet, so he can finally just go and rest, have some sleep. However, Jesus is not telling us to bug God. He's not telling us to just bug him until he gives us whatever we're asking for. He's using this as a contrasting illustration. Like I said, the friend does not want to give the man what he's requesting, because Well, not because it is his friend, but because of the commotion the man is making. Jesus is showing how terrible a friend the friend is compared to the faithfulness of God. So let's keep this in mind as we look at the rest of the passage. Sorry. In verses 11 through 13, Jesus is making the illustration of the father giving a child what it is requesting. If the child asks for a fish, what kind of father would give him a snake? Or if he asks for an egg, what kind of father would give him a scorpion? And he says in verse 13, if you who are evil and know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give you the Holy Spirit? And Jesus is using these two illustrations to make a point about prayer. First, he's illustrating how you should pray, and second, he's illustrating what God's response would be to your prayers. However, he does use these illustrations in a funny way. He shows that even a bad friend will give in to a request if you are persistent enough, because honestly, they just want you to stop bugging them about it. And if a bad friend will give you what you want if you are persistent, then how much more will God in heaven give you what you need if you are persistent? He wants us to keep on asking him and asking him and asking him to be persistent in our prayers. So an example of this is when I was at Virginia Tech, I had 3 other roommates, all who didn't have a car, and I was the only one who had a car. So obviously they had to rely on me to get to different places, which was fine, except for a few times, which is like at 3 or 4 in the morning, which is usually when they ask me for a ride. And us being college students, we're usually awake at that time, not really doing much. We're supposed to be doing stuff, but anyways, they would come into my room, and around this time I'd be getting very tired, so I was, getting ready to sleep or already was sleeping. They wake me up anyways and say, hey, are you hungry? Like, no, I'm sleeping. Not hungry. But I knew what they were really asking. They were really asking, hey, you want to drive me to McDonald's to get some food? But, they were just being nice, I guess, and asking in a nice way. But, of course, I would say no, because I want to sleep, or I'm really tired, I honestly don't feel like driving them at this hour. But they would keep asking me and asking me and asking me, to the point where I was so awake that I was just fine, let's just go, because I couldn't even sleep anymore. Yeah. But yeah, so that's the example. Sorry, I kind of lost my place. Yeah, so they would keep asking me and asking me and asking me, and I gave them a ride, not because I was their great friend or whatever, but it's just because I just wanted them to stop bugging me, because I really needed some sleep. However, it's different when we ask God for something. He doesn't just give it to us so we can be silent and he can finally, get some rest and away from us. But he gives because he wants us to have what he can give us. He doesn't get irritated or upset when we come to him and ask him of things again and again and again. A perfect example of this is King David. If you look in the Psalms, David cries out again and again to God. In Psalms 55 and 61 and 86, hear my prayer, O God, and listen to my prayer, O God. He cries out again and again because David knows the Father's heart. He's persistent in his prayers, not because he's trying to bug God to get what he wants, but he persistently prays because he knows that God is patient to hear our prayers, and he's gracious when he gives it. So on to the second illustration. It's sort of like the first. It says, if we who are wicked and have children give our children good gifts, then how much more will God love to give good gifts to us when we ask? So I remember when I was young, I used to love airplanes. I think when I was about 6, I used to really want to be a pilot in the military or wherever. I really wanted to fly planes. And, I had this enormous love for airplanes and toy airplanes and stuff like that. So Christmases and birthdays were the best, greatest time of the year because I got tons of airplanes for gifts from my parents. They would always give me an airplane. I loved airplanes so much that anytime any family member would fly in an airplane and they would come